The courtroom air felt heavier than iron when the judge leaned forward, her gavel resting like a silent threat against the wood, and a single father realized that the fate of his child, his name, and his entire future had narrowed into one unbearable sentence spoken behind closed doors. Before the verdict was read aloud, before the cuffs were even imagined around his wrists, the offer came, quiet, controlled, devastating, and in that moment, the man who had survived poverty, loss, and humiliation understood that justice could sometimes ask a price more painful than prison itself. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and stories that challenge the meaning of right and wrong, take a moment now to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel name. Your support helps stories like this reach hearts that need them. He had never planned to be a single father. Life had decided that for him on a rainy night when his wife never came home, leaving behind a silence louder than grief and a child too young to understand why bedtime stories suddenly felt hollow. From that night on, his world became small and exacting, school lunches prepared before sunrise, night shifts taken without complaint, and whispered promises made to a sleeping child that tomorrow would be better. He learned to carry exhaustion like a second spine and shame like a shadow, especially after the accident that changed everything. A desperate choice, a borrowed car, a wrong turn under pressure, and suddenly he was standing in a courtroom accused of a crime that the law saw clearly, but the heart could not. The sentence looming over him was long enough to steal his child's childhood away. The judge who presided over his case was known for her sharp mind and colder reputation. She had risen through the system with precision, admired by some, feared by many. From the bench, she watched him not as a man but as a case file bound in red tape, a statistic waiting to be processed. Yet something shifted when the room emptied and the doors closed. The offer she made was not shouted or dramatized, it was delivered with the calm authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. One night, she said, and the sentence would disappear, erased as if it had never existed. No witnesses, no record. A transaction sealed in silence. The words hollowed him out. He was not naive, life had already taught him how power could bend rules and how the poor were often crushed beneath it. Still, the weight of the proposition made his hands tremble. He thought of his child sitting alone at a school desk, waiting for a father who might never return. He thought of birthdays missed, scraped knees untended, and bedtime prayers whispered into emptiness. He also thought of the mirror he would have to face every morning if he agreed, and the kind of lesson his survival would teach the little life depending on him. That night, he walked the city streets until dawn, the cold biting through his thin jacket, the decision gnawing at him like hunger. Every memory argued with every fear. He remembered his child's laugh, the way it filled their small apartment and made the cracked walls feel warm. He remembered his own father, a man who had chosen dignity over comfort and paid for it dearly. The law had failed him, yes, but did that give him permission to abandon himself entirely? The offer promised freedom, but it threatened to take something quieter and irreplaceable in return. When the time came to decide, he did not arrive with confidence or certainty. He arrived carrying the full weight of his life in his chest. The night passed without spectacle, stripped of the fantasies that power often imagines. What remained was two human beings confronting the consequences of their choices. He did not feel victorious when morning came. He felt older, altered, and deeply aware that survival sometimes leaves scars no sentence ever could. True to her word, the judge erased the punishment. The charges vanished, the case dissolved, and the system moved on as if nothing had happened. He returned home to his child, who ran into his arms unaware of how close their world had come to shattering. Neighbors offered polite smiles, employers offered shifts again, and life resumed its fragile rhythm. But inside him, something restless refused to settle. Freedom tasted strange when bought at such a cost, and silence felt heavier than chains. Weeks turned into months, and the man began to understand that being spared by injustice did not absolve him from responsibility. He volunteered at a legal aid center after work, helping others navigate the same maze that had nearly consumed him. He spoke softly, listened carefully, and learned that healing could come from service. The judge, too, began to change in ways no one saw. The power she had wielded so easily that night started to feel like a burden, and cracks formed in the armor she had built around herself. Years later, their lives crossed again in a different setting, one without gavels or closed doors. There was no acknowledgement of the past, no attempt to justify or erase it. What remained was the quiet understanding that choices made in darkness echo far longer than sentences read aloud. The man had grown into a father his child admired not for his perfection, but for his perseverance. He taught honesty, even when the truth hurt, and kindness, even when the world was cruel. As his child stood on the edge of adulthood, ready to step into a future shaped by love rather than loss, the father finally felt something close to peace. Not because the past had been redeemed, but because it had been faced. He understood now that dignity is not always about refusing the unbearable, sometimes it is about living well after surviving it. His story was not one of triumph over evil, but of endurance, accountability, and the fragile hope that even broken systems can inspire better people to rise within them. If this story touched your heart, if it made you feel the weight of choices and the power of compassion, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to Channel Name. Your engagement helps stories like this continue to find voices. And before you go, leave a comment sharing what you believe matters most when everything is on the line: justice, mercy, or the courage to live with the truth.